Okay, my name is Betsy Glosser, and I have the joy of introducing our scholarship students. And as you know, each of the scholarship students is invited to give a presentation to us, and that's what we're about to hear now. Our first student is Lizzie Roig. She is from Kansas City and is a student at the Art Institute in Kansas City. One of the things I found interesting about her background is she's from a Catalan American household and has also studied in San Miguel Allende. So with that, Lizzie Roy.
We have the microphone on a weaving comb now. So maybe that will make things less like pop. Oh, well. Okay. Is the volume okay? Yeah. Okay. Okay, so hello everyone. As you just heard, my name is Lizzie Roig, or Roig, as you would say in Catalan. I'm currently a senior studying fiber, textiles, and art history at the Kansas City Art Institute. And I'm also currently KCAI's student senior representative. I'm very excited to share a little bit of my journey with you all today, thanks to Warp's Alice Brown Memorial Scholarship. Having the opportunity to contribute to an organization like Warp has been so meaningful to me because community is something that I associate really heavily with textiles, and it's been the backbone of my learning experience. So I can't wait to spend even more time talking and learning with you all. It has been so special being in a room full of people who have the same loves and passions for craft and supporting others that I have gotten. I think it's frozen. Reset it. Okay, good.
You're not sharing.
I'm not sharing. Shoot.
Uh-oh.
That's maybe our problem. Hold on. Let's go back with share. Was it this one? Was it the, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Okay, let's try again. One more time. Okay. Let's go back and see if it'll work. Okay.
Okay, there you go. Okay, cool. All right, because most of my development has happened at the Kansas City Art Institute, I think it's valuable to briefly explain what that experience has really given me, since it's guided basically all of my decisions as an artist and community member. So the curriculum in the KCI Fiber Department is incredibly diverse. It introduces students to many different processes as possible so that we can all have a range of tools at our disposal. Over the course of 3 years, we learn various surface design and dye methods, some construction techniques, material manipulation, fiber property studies, and weaving. Because of this, I never really settled with just one method of working, and I love just jumping around and combining a bunch of different things. My weaving journey started roughly a year and a half ago, and it has become my primary art medium. I like to embrace the idea that my inspirations, perspectives, and tools may look very different as I continue to learn. The development of hand skills has shifted my approach in everything that I do. Many of these processes and deeper understandings of materials have made me more confident in myself and my own capabilities. The combination of those hands-on approaches in my education, the community that I get to work alongside, and the reflective space that weaving gives me has built a larger capacity of patience and appreciation with me that has led me to show up for others so much more in my community. All of my classmates and myself entered weaving with no deep prior knowledge. If any of us had expectations or a pressure to go above and beyond, we were stopped in our tracks because there was no way to define what we were even striving for. Our professor values a very hands-on, personal problem-solving teaching approach. We were all in the ideal situation of being so new to something that there were no barriers and we could just have as much fun as we wanted. This is a picture of my class and our first weavings. So the process broke us all out of our shells completely, as we could ask each other questions before running to our professor. We had the space to make our first weavings from really true and intuitive places. And the critique for this project seemed more like a psychoanalysis. Each small choice, like color, density, or texture in our weavings, was saying something about the type of people we are, and it was proven in our conversations. That's my class again. Yeah, each of us just are constantly fueling each other's motivations and inspirations. So I had to say thank you to them. All right, so the capacity of weavings and someone's dexterity being able to say so much about them has become a core theme in my art making as I explore personal history, tradition, and memory. Understanding how these themes have been translated artistically as universal human concepts has been a large part of my research as a maker. Those concepts lead me to the summer after my first year in the fiber department, where I had the opportunity to study traditional tapestry and indigenous natural dye methods in San Miguel de Allende, Mexico, through an abroad program at KCAI. As a student, I had the privilege of having so many amazing conversations with locals that I don't think I could have had as a first-time tourist. I got to learn about the importance of textiles in San Miguel's history and how families today still rely on that craft to support themselves. The tapestry that I made and the tapestries I got to study by other makers were extremely durable, full of color, and contained many complex patterns. These pieces were vibrant reflections of the place that I got to experience and the people that I got to meet. I was learning a crucial part of another culture through my hands, which was a helpful method for my classmates and I who either spoke some or no Spanish. That muscle memory I briefly engaged with, the extreme concentration that was needed to make a tapestry, was grounding in a completely new way, and I left with a deeper sense of respect to carry with me as I continue making. The traditional making that I worked with there, which was so detached from my own conceptual work, helped me find a really good balance in my practice. I hope to continue traveling and learning abroad, but while it's not fully possible on a student budget, I love transporting myself into similar experiences thanks to a great library we have in our fiber department and also great book recommendations that I found on Work's website already. Many things have been added to the summer reading list. This is a picture of an Icelandic Varafelder that I made using local fleece. After reading some books and blogs about their history, I fell in love with a new method of incorporating texture into my work. And as a textile artist, I always like to say that the past and the enduring traditions of craft are my teachers. This weaving was my final project for my junior year as I explored traditions of mourning and craft. I was inspired largely by Victorian mourning hair pieces. And my ambition has been less driven by a need to make something completely new and instead set off into a massive sea of knowledge that has been left to us all. In combination with those expansive histories, I also turned to my personal stories. Before I left to school, my mother prepared a personal family photo archive for me. I would mostly look at all of the photos passively, but after my first two weaving projects, I realized that many of the reflections and design choices I was making while weaving were related to my family and my upbringing. So you can see that those intuitive choices that I was making in my work almost seem directly inspired by either photos of my family or nostalgic places and styles. On the left is a picture of my great godmother's curtains. She lived in a Victorian home in Bay City, Michigan, and loved to decorate, but who doesn't? So sitting at the loom has really become a chamber of reflection for me. I find that I really clear my head and I focus on the back and forth rhythms. Time flies away, like really bad. And those rhythms while weaving always end up feeling so similar to the push and pull of waves. I never ever feel alone while I'm at the loom because I always think about how with great effort I've become connected to a long line of makers who have woven or crafted for a variety of reasons. The intensive process of preparing a loom and making a weaving gave me the space to process a grief that I realized I hadn't known what to do with before. After some time of understanding the weight that textiles can hold, I felt called to make a weaving that I could channel those feelings into. Over the course of 2 months in the winter of 2025, I dedicated my time to figuring out a good system I could use for printing images onto the warps of my weavings. Because I was experimenting with different printing methods in some other parts of my practice, I knew I was mostly drawn to a method which first involved soaking my warp in gallnut tannin, and then after that tannin bath, preparing a large printing table with some plastic cloth, and then that warp would be stretched out to dry and tensioned over the table, and the reed from the loom could be passed forward so that the yarns were evened out for printing. For the print, I burned the image of my great godmother and mother that I showed earlier at large scale onto a photo emulsion coated printing instrument. From there, I printed that image onto my warp using thickened iron mordant. I was limited to 2 4-harness floor looms that could fit through the doors of both the weaving and print studio, and also had wheels. The scale of the image exceeded the width that I could go on a single movable loom, so I split the image in half to print on 2 same-length warps. So I just had to mark where the images would line up and account for some mild shrinkage on the sides. As the iron interacted with the tannin, I watched the threads transform from a rust brown to a jet black. After all the effort to embed the image into the warp, I had to leave myself open to the uncertainty of what it could transform into once woven. I was so happy with the clarity of the image, but part of me was preparing to lose it all once the woven structure would go over it. As I wove over the image on both looms, I watched it disappear. Engaged in a process that felt like a morning ritual. I poured myself into the labor and controlling certain elements, but ultimately I had to relinquish my expectations completely. While I was working, I was looking at the back of both weavings, with no great way to really see what I was working on without risking the tension. This was no straightforward structure, using both traditional and experimental methods of overshot structure and tapestry techniques that I learned in San Miguel. I forced myself to take as much time as I needed with this piece. Once both halves had come off the loom, I stitched them together like a traditional coverlet, laid them out on the floor, and faced the result of what I had made. The image of my godmother and mother were still clear, now mildly fragmented within a delicate structure. The warp for this weaving is a combination of silk, linen, and rayon, giving it an aged quality and unique reaction to light. Completing this work has given me one of the strongest senses of peace and resolution I've ever felt. And yes, part of that is because of all the overcomplicated things I put myself through. Winter break rolled in after I finished this, which meant that I could take it home to my mom in Orlando. And although I was so pleased with how it looked in the gallery, I felt like the weaving deserved something more. So I returned to the beach that I spent most of my childhood visiting, and I washed it. The sea was calmer that day and treated it gently, and I was amazed by seeing one of my works floating in the water versus floating in the gallery. The image in the weaving seemed so free, and part of me couldn't stop thinking about how my godmother and mother traveled across that same grand sea and how their paths led me to where I am today. It felt nearly full circle. I find that even though I set out with goals whenever I work on new projects, in the end, the final product always tells me way more than I could ever expect. Studying textiles has given me the ability to frequently connect with other authentic and deeply feeling people, and it has also taught me how to connect more honestly with myself. I'm constantly amazed by the connections that exist within everything, between things past and present, especially when we don't mean to find them. Thank you all so much for listening to my journey so far and for being a part of it with me.
Thank you. That was wonderful. And we're going to take questions at the end. So next, I'd like to introduce Ashlyn Merrill, who is a graduate of Kent State and who now works at Praxis in Cleveland.
Okay, hi everybody. Am I holding this close enough to my face? Okay, great. I forgot my stopwatch, so if I'm cutting it close, just tell me. Hopefully I'm not. Hello, my name is Ashlyn Merrill, as you just heard, and I was born and raised in Lawrence, Kansas before attending Kent State University. I graduated in May of 2025. Titled my presentation Plane Weave after going through many different title choices. But as you'll see, I use plane weave all the time. It's pretty much the only structure I use, and I'm from the plains, so it felt fitting. So just to introduce myself a bit more, on the right is a photo of my studio, and on the left, also I wanted to say thank you so much to Work for having me. It's such a pleasure to be here, and I feel so lucky to be here with everyone, and I'm looking forward to what we all learn together this weekend. So on the right is a photo of my studio, which is also my bedroom, obviously. And this loom was gifted to me by a former student of one of my professors. Something I'm going to talk about a lot is the lineage that's passed through weaving and how grateful I am to be able to bring this loom back to life. And so hopefully her hands can continue weaving through mine. On the left is a photo of my studio assistant, Bobby. So I found myself weaving in high school. I learned how to weave using a canvas stretcher as a frame loom, but I've always been drawn to yarn. As a child, I would string chains of yarn, finger knitting, and then undo it and restring and undo it. I wasn't actually making anything, but there's something about the running it through my fingers that I've always been drawn to. And then I started floor loom weaving in college, fell in love with it, and still doing it all the time. So a bit about my work. I make sculptural textiles. I'm very drawn to the form of weavings more so than the image of the cloth. I'm in love with the cloth itself and its emotionality. So as our fast-paced society seeks to desensitize us to extraordinary emotions, I create embodiments of immense joy and grief colliding in everyday life. I experience an inexplicable and hopeful sorrow in the woven plane. My shuttle travels back and forth through the shed of the warp, flinging between two sides, life and death, joy and grief, certainty and uncertainty. In this veil, I yearn for us to find connection through vulnerable threads. So I'm really influenced by artists such as Olga de Amaral, Magdalena Apkanovich, and Indira Levra, and kind of their conceptions about the cloth as a holder of grief and joy, and with that, how we may connect to that. So I am also very interested in poetry as part of my practice and as a way to describe what I'm trying to get at. So I wanted to share one with you to start. Under the willow breeze, I am coaxed to sun drunk. I've become the boy, wind gust. I've become the boy knee deep in Lake Erie in the damp hem of mother's dress. I grow a beak and squawk. I become the gull overhead, the litter wedge between rocks. I am someone who looks like my sister, soaked in horizon. How far can I press my body into the earth? So as I'm moving through my daily life, I find myself people watching and getting really overwhelmed by that. You know, when you're on an airplane, as many of you were on an airplane, you see the cars below you and you're overwhelmed by thinking about where are all those people going? What are they going through today? So I think that's what I'm trying to talk about conceptually in my work, and weaving is a way for me to kind of work through that. So I'm going to start by talking about my senior thesis exhibition, and then I'll jump back in time and kind of talk about how I got there. So my exhibition was titled I-70 Back and Forth. I would drive home from school, which is a 12-hour drive, and I still do that drive frequently through the Midwest, and it's a really interesting landscape. So my work is very informed by landscape. So to create these pieces that I installed in the gallery, these outer pieces are supposed to be like a representation of the earth and the land on the left and the sky on the right. And the viewers are welcome to walk the horizon line. To create these, I used a 16 shaft loom and wove in 4 layers that I could then unfold to these kind of massive scale weavings. So I would be looking at 36 inches wide on the loom, but then there's actually 4 layers underneath them, which was very fun. So I dye all of the materials that I work with, except for that thin red thread that I'm very scared to run out of, because I don't know what to do. And so inside of these more massive weavings, I have weavings that are more saturated in color. So as you walk around these, there are also little holes included. So you would see these more colorful layers shining through. So again, I'm very influenced by the Kansas landscape and the emotionality of it. It is a state and land that has a really complicated, complex history. And the seasonality is something I'm drawn to. The seasons are extremely intense. The hottest hots and the coldest colds and the iciest ice. And I'm interested in how that cyclicality comes across in weaving too. You weave in cycles. You finish a piece and you put a new one on, and so on and so forth. So you can see in this picture a bit better the holes that I've included in the weavings towards the bottom. Like I said, I'm very inspired by an artist who's named Indira Allegra. Her writing is something that influenced me a lot in my practice, and they have a piece writing on grief threads and grief portals and how each interlacement of a thread can be a portal to experience through. So I'm interested in what it means to open that portal wider. What does it mean to let ourselves feel grief and hope to their fullest extents? This is another photo of the Konza Prairie. The sky is enormous. It makes you feel very tiny and very large at the same time. It's confusing. You can feel everything at once. Here's another photo of the weavings up close, with kind of the different colors that you'll see throughout the seasons. So as viewers were walking around the gallery, these weavings would move and sway with their movement. The cloth is breathing with the viewers as they're walking the horizon. By having these outer pieces being very thin in this more desaturated color, I'm talking about what it means to view life through the lens of grief, which once you've experienced loss, whether it be familial, an opportunity, of anything like that, your view of life changes, and I think it's important to acknowledge that instead of pushing it down. So to jump back in time, this was a piece I made in 2022. I talk a lot about familial history in my work as well. My mother's parents immigrated from former Yugoslavia in 1969. My grandma was Croatian and my grandpa was Serbian. And as I was growing up, I spent a lot of time with them, and they spoke a very specific mix of Serbo-Croatian and English, which I unfortunately wasn't able to speak. So there was always a little bit of a language barrier between us, but that didn't stop us from connecting very deeply. And I think that cloth is one way to do this. Both of my grandmothers were fabulous fiber artists. My mom's mom was a career seamstress at a dress factory in Kansas City, and my paternal grandmother was a really fabulous quilter. So again, I hope that through being a weaver and maker, I'm able to keep their memories and stories alive. So with this weaving, it was my first attempt at word painting. So I used words and phrases that I had heard many times and could remember and know what they mean, and painted them onto the cloth in Cyrillic. And then after I wove them, I also used inlay to kind of emphasize some of those words. So while my color is very influenced by landscape, I also realized after weaving this that I was drawing colors from cultural cloth. This was a shirt that my grandmother had brought over when she immigrated, and I remember kind of sneaking into her closet and admiring it. It was also a shirt that my mother and her sister would wear to events, which I didn't know until I was talking to my mom about it the other day. And that red thread is something that I use in every single one of my weavings. The way that it bursts out from the cloth, it's a red that I find both sorrowful and proud, passionate. It is a very complex color to me that I really love. So this is one image of the finished cloth. You can see that it became very abstracted, the painting that is in the warp, which I really enjoy. We weren't allowed to paint it with it still on the loom, so we had to get kind of creative with how to do that warp painting. So that is why I also ended up using the inlay to emphasize some of those words, which I really enjoy. Steady malo, which is the phrase in that top left, means sit with me a while, sit with me a little bit, which is something that I heard a lot, and I would sit with my grandma. And so I created a video piece taking it to a park, sitting with it in front of different park benches and spending time with her. It was really nice to hear Lizzie talk about curtains. These are my grandmother's curtains that were in her bedroom. I would take naps in there with her and admire this velvet light seeping through the curtains. This was my first exploration into jacquard weaving, which is not something I do anymore, but it was definitely a jumping off point. And I, again, am very, very interested in color and its meanings. And so while weaving this, I was thinking about the concept of blue being the color of distance. When you're looking to a distant place, it's blue. So by making this and by making a lot of my cloth, I'm reaching for places that I love and have very fond memories of that I'm not able to return to. So I'm bringing these memories back to life, giving them a second life, a transformed life. And I think it's really special how cloth can be a sacred place. The curtains in my grandmother's room are a magical place for me. The tablecloth that gets changed seasonally is a magical place. The special one that you bring out for special meals is a sacred place. So I think that's something that I'm also very drawn through about textiles in my weaving practice. This was another iteration of that. I also, do some printmaking in my practice. Doing this has honestly led to kind of where my work is now. The use of printmaking to abstract a piece, cut it apart and sew it back together to again recreate that space in a transformed way. This is also where I started getting a bit more sculptural with my work. Hanging objects in space, and I use very thin materials too, so they're able to move and sway and become these kind of ghostly objects. So a bit about my dye process. There is a passage of a book that was given to me by the woman who gave me my loom that reads, "When time was being born, when days were forming from the mist, a great-great-grandparent sort of pale purple rose out of the magic haze. There is magic in all purple." And I feel that way about all colors. Right now, I'm reading What Colors is Sacred by Michael Taussig. I haven't finished it yet, but one part that really stuck out to me was he was talking about how color is this indescribable symbol. And for me, color is very much this language that cannot be boxed in by words. And I think that is why I do not weave images into cloth. I use the color and the form to create those connotations and those sculptural objects. So I dye very freely. I create dye stalks and then put everything in a bath and throw color on. I do use the salt and the soda ash. Unfortunately, I use synthetic dyes. I really want to learn natural dyeing, which I'm sure we'll talk about more this weekend. But I will dye my materials over and over again. I think it's really interesting to see the depth that can come through in different yarns using different colors. And what I think is really fun about it is how I tend to gravitate towards the same dyes over and over, or sometimes I'll use different dyes and still end up with the same colors. That kind of magnetic spiritual pull that we have. The color is really special to me. I know my dyes better than I know paint. So this was my second attempt at warp painting. This time we put the warp on the loom and wove small sections of plain weave, painted them, and then reworked the loom, which was a bit more successful. Again, I'm getting more and more sculptural with my weavings, and I keep having the desire to weave larger and larger objects. And I think to talk about the curtains again, I'm moving towards sculpture because of forms like that, where light is able to seep through the thin cloth. And then this was the one of the last projects I did right before my senior thesis, and it was my first go at a multi-cloth structure, and I really fell in love with it. Even though I'm not able to work at the same scale that I was, I still use it because I really love that kind of sensual ridge that it creates where you have to unfold the cloth. And I'm weaving these holes in the cloth, and I'm having more fun with color and creating these kind of different horizon lines with the striation of the wefts in my weavings. One comment that I really enjoyed one time when I was weaving was that I would put my face kind of right next to the cloth and pull the warps apart to peer through to the layers underneath to be able to put holes on the bottom too. And someone told me that I always looked like I was smelling my weavings. I think it's really fun and intimate how personal you get with your loom, how personal you get with your yarn. Your skin cells are on every little bit of what you're making, which I really enjoy. These objects come to life. And that kind of magical force that the loom puts into your weaving too. You're not weaving by yourself. The loom has its own personality too. So this was that last project right before my thesis, and then we're back there. So kind of where I am now, I just finished up my internship at Praxis Fiber Workshop in Cleveland, which was such a joy. And I'm now teaching their intro to weaving class too. It's really such a joy to be able to watch people fall in love with weaving. So this piece, the warp for it, the first dye is on the right, and then you can tell that the color is very different on the left. I'm having a lot more fun with dye now, letting myself get some more saturation back into my life. So I still used a multi-cloth structure on this, but it's a bit smaller than my previous work. After weaving, I cut the cloth apart to create multiple pieces and then stitch them back together. I am also using spray paint and painting on my works after they're off the loom now. I was very inspired by this road work in Kent, where people around me are getting really enraged at this roundabout that's being put in. People fly around. I can see people cursing it in their car, which I find really interesting. I mean, I'm very inspired, again, by people watching and wondering where all these people are rushing off to. And there's a sign right next to it that all the time just says slow, slow, slow. And so this is kind of an homage to that sign, telling people to slow down, take the time to get to where you're going, which I think is a message we could all use in our lives. So this is a close-up of that spray paint. I created a stencil just using cardstock, and then on the bottom you can see where I've cut one piece apart and I've turned it sideways, and then I use a needle to weave those warp ends back into the other piece of cloth. I love these kind of tendrils hanging off, my fingers through them. But yeah, I was inspired by the technique of tapestry where you weave the warps back into the bottom, so it creates that really kind of clean edge. And then this is the piece that I'm currently working on. It's not in its finished form. I use honeycomb in this as well to create more portals than the holes allow me to. This is really inspired by the work that I saw of the woman who gave me my loom. In her work, she was talking about different walkways and portals to go through, which I really connected with. So I dyed all these materials, and the warp was linen that she had given to me. Excuse me. Linen that she had given to me that I then dyed in a color that I saw in a lot of her work and mine. So these kind of two pieces coming together. In my work, I hope that I can encourage people to find connection through our more vulnerable emotions. And I feel connected to my family and other people and all the weavers around me through my weaving practice. So I'm going to share one more poem with you before I go. Because weaving makes me feel like I'm part of something bigger and larger than myself, as we all are. And I can't wait to pass on my loom to the next person. So time marches on and the world will be as the moon, quiet and soft as harvest mice ghosts, full of hope and sorrow. I know a secret so splendid. Really, it's some kind of God. Blessed is a tremor. Blessed is a blue sky. I know for me there's no designer, yet I do not wish to conquer death. You don't have to prove a sort of genuine certainty, a sort of waving, slow breath. I know. Blessed is this very great mystery, the pain, the mess, and daylight of my weavings, and I hope to talk to you all more later on. Thank you.
Next, I'd like to call up Gwendolyn Fisk. Gwen is a student at the College of the North Atlantic, and she's interested in particular in textiles from Nordic, Slavic, and Scandinavian origins, and also uses the TC2.
Well, I have the opportunity to. Hello, hello. I have brought some samples of my work here. So I'll get those out for 1 second. Hello, I'm Gwendolyn Fisk. I'm a graduate of the Textiles and Apparel Design program. Press button. My current work focuses on knit and weave structures, combining technical precision and creating expression. I'm a very curious person. I push new techniques to understand how it works. How does this work? Can you tell me? Use to create functional, one-of-a-kind pieces, blending sustainability, craftsmanship, and thoughtful design. Of course, I had to list my favorite ones. So I am a weaver, a knitter, a felter, and I love making paper. I hope one day I make one piece with all of these techniques in one piece. That's the goal. Of course, you need to know how I got here. So, even as a child, everything that I touched, I love texture. How does that feel? What is that made of? So come around like, is this knitted? And I'm like 8. Right? And she's like, yes, it's knitted. Of course, this carried into my junior high and high school years, where I actually got into the textiles room, and then I became a volunteer helping the textile teachers with like basic knitting and stuff, and they saw a lot of potential in my work, and especially my work ethic. I'm very, tell me where I need to be, I'll be there. So I then went to the Textiles and Apparel Design program at the College of the North Atlantic at CNA, St. John's, Newfoundland, Labrador. And I just graduated this year, and I'm planning to go back for a 3rd year. So the program itself is made up of 3 different categories. We have surface design, which is embroidery, needle felting, natural dyes, acid dyes, and then we have fabric design, that's knitting on knitting machines, weaving on looms, and then we have apparel design, which is making clothing, designing your own patterns, and of course, like making constructions of things. And you get to choose 2, and then you can go back for a 3rd year and do the 3rd one. So, of course, I'm actively involved in creating, making through education with a strong focus in textiles and fiber arts. driven from passion of creativity as well as desire to continue to learn, explore, and develop new skills. I aspire to be an artist that enjoys life, that expresses joys of life through textile-based work while seeking to understand the deeper questions of who, what, where, when, why, and how. Of course, I will emphasize the joys of life. I want to show the best parts of life so people can look at it and say, yeah, I want to be there. All right? So, I'm blowing through this. We're gonna slow down now. So my works, since it's only been 2 years since I did this program, and the first year is just exploration entirely. I only got to do like a bit of weaving. It was the first time I was ever introduced to weaving. Is when I started this program, which they have amazing instructors that have a lot of experience in the field, which I'm so grateful that I could have them by my side, because without them, I really probably wouldn't be here. They're great people. All right, we'll start with the first guy. This was in my second year. I took fabric design, so then I could just mainly focus one class in creating woven pieces. I had a chance to study double weaving, and as I did some sampling, just was playing around, because you do one giant sample where you sample it. My teachers really heavily say, you need a sample. You need to understand your materials before you make a final piece. So when I was doing my sampling, I was like, hey, this kind of looks like a scale. Wonder what I could do with it. And so I divvied up my own fish pattern. This is blue cotton and black wool in 216 fiber. Sample, which I'd love to pass this around. Where do I start? There you go. And this is definition. We can pass this one around too. Of course, when I was looking into this people fish, I really wanted to go into different fibers and textures, especially when I love felting. I really wanted to bring the felting aspect into this double weave structure. And I also found that if I had spaces, these blue squares kind of look like jellyfish. So I got jellyfish and a fish. I also found that if I do some, like them together, one side will have vertical stripes and another other side of that same fabric will have horizontal stripes. I found that very fascinating. This is as of now is a sample, and I don't have a loom currently. I really want one. So I definitely want to do a lot more double weave structures. Absolutely love doing it. Probably took me 2 weeks to do that. Another one of my classes was a design class where we had to design a product and then make it every week. And so I decided I can weave a scarf in a week, which sometimes it was like finishing the day of, but I'm very happy that I took this on. I used a rigid heddle loom and explored color theory, pick up natural dyes, textures, tartan patterns, again with cotton and wool to add that differential texture. I have those with me as well. I'll pass those around.
Yeah, sorry.
So I did, the first one was this blue and yellow and red. I used color theory to create a rainbow scarf. And this one's actually one of my favorites because I have a matching pair of pants. But my teacher, as I went on, like I did pickup for the word ice cream. I currently don't have the one because that one got bought. I'm very happy it's going to some guy's granddaughter. I love that. And then chunky wools versus differentials. And this one in the bottom left corner was my instructor saying, use natural dye. I was like, okay. I was a bit on the fence, but I made that one, and it is one of my favorite pieces that I have made. Of course, this is the one big project. So in my course, there is a capstone project, and this capstone project is pretty much you put everything that you've ever learned in the last year and a half, and you make something. And of course, I love finding a deeper meaning in my work. I don't want it just to be a thing. And so I set on a mission. I said, hey, there's also this award called Teleo Impact Award, which is only given out to a few schools, which is a award, $1,000 award to a sustainably, ethically made fashion garment. And so I said, I'm going to do that, but then I'm going to weave it. And so I made a woven wrap skirt, including Morse code overshot. So it's a double woven pockets. There's 4 different pockets on the garment. And the overshot pattern is the word butterflies, which I made matching machine embroidered butterflies to go with. I did not sadly bring any, and I don't think I put any in the slideshow, but come look at my photos on my phone. So I put the little Morse code pattern there. It's a wrap skirt and it's 100% wool that I got online. It's a local Canadian wool. I had that get shipped in. I did use acid dyes to dye my orange with golden, yellow, and fuchsia. And there's some images of the skirt. I'm gonna pull it out of a bag there. This piece. I was thinking of just wearing it. No one can see it, but it's okay. We'll find it later. I'm a very movement-oriented person. I'm sorry. So this is my beautiful skirt. It's got 4 pockets, and I really love it. It has absolutely everything that I wanted in a garment, and it was made with the help of all my professors. Lots of sit-down consultations, lots of last minute, let's do it this way, but it's something that I really wanted to do and was motivated and was able to do. Of course, I have inspiration from pretty much everywhere, but I'm going to start at one of my favorite ones. I am a beginner weaver. I've only had a year to explore this techniques, and I really want to learn more. Things like I'd love to learn about cultures, traditions of certain textiles and how they're made. One of my favorite things is the Eurovision Song Contest, which is a European song competition that happens annually. It has introduced me to other cultures and their traditional music, dance, and garments. I'm fascinated on how they made them and the significance behind the garments displayed on stage. And right here in the picture, this is a Russian's performance with Russian women, and I love the print and the garments that she wearing. Of course, the important stuff. This is areas of textile interest by when. Of course, how and why. So of course, the storytelling behind pieces. What materials did they have when they made it? Why did they make it that way? Is there a certain reason or certain circumstances of like time period and material? course. Technology and innovation is another one that I really strongly love. It's about showing people that there's another way, but also there is the old ways too. I love every single version of weaving. And I got to go, I had an opportunity to go up to Corner Brook, which is the west coast of Newfoundland, to the Center of Research and Innovation, or CRI. At the CRI, they have many tools and equipment to help artisans, local artisans and makers with tools like 3D printers, workshop tools, but they also had the TC2 digital loom. And my teacher got to use that for her master's program. And she said, "Do you want to go up there March break this year?" And I said, "Yeah." So I hopped on a bus. It was about an 8-hour bus. And I got there and I spent a week just playing around with the TC2 digital loom. And I'm so grateful for my instructor for helping me set up that interaction. Of course, the traditions and techniques of pretty much the story of the fabric. So what is it telling me? What techniques do you use? Why do you still use them? What's the significance of the textiles and the traditional techniques that you did use while making those? Of course, I have to wrap up saying like what I wish to get from this conference, as I feel so grateful to be in the same room with as many beautiful, talented artisans. I wish to expand my weaving knowledge, learn from you guys, and explore textile entrepreneurship, learn how to make and sell, but also make and learn about it. Of course, I had to quote myself because I come up with really cool stuff, and sometimes I need to write it down. But this is a rare opportunity to be surrounded by so many skilled textile artists. I'm Gwendolyn Fisk, and I'm a fiber artist, and I'm dedicated to exploring textiles practice while developing contemporary and artistic works. Ta-da!
Nope. I hope we can see the skirt later. Next, I'd like to introduce Leonie Rigaud-Peloquin. Leonie is a student at University of Concordia in fibers and material practices. She has traveled to Colombia and Oaxaca in her studies and created something called the Wandering Loom Project. So with that, Leonie.
Thank you. Yes, thank you very much. Hello, everybody. I'll just take this out so I don't have to play it on. Right. So I got a very original name for my presentation, or presentation. Can you hear me well? Is that good? A bit here? Yeah, okay. So hello, my name is Leonie. I'm from Montreal, Quebec, here in Canada. It's about a 6-hour drive to get here. So I'm an artist and textile student at Concordia University. I'm currently in the Fibers and Material Practices program. I will finish next year, so I'll be a senior. I'm taking 4 years to complete it. Taking my time. Thank you very much to the organizing committee for having me here. I'm very happy to be here. I'm lucky to be surrounded by great artists, textile artists in Montreal as well, but it's nice to be able to extend the circle internationally. So happy to meet you all. I will tell you a bit about my journey in the world of textiles, and as well as share a few projects I made. I'll share 3, and then I'll share my current interests and future projects I'd like to undertake. So in Quebec, between high school and between high school and university, we have CJEP programs that allow us to explore a bit more our interests before committing to a full university course. And one of these programs are art and craft. So they offer jewelry, ceramics, they offer glass blowing, but also textile construction. And so it's at the Center of Contemporary Textile in Montreal that I did the textile construction program. I did 2 out of the 3 years they offer. And so they offer a technique-based and also how to market what you do, so an entrepreneurial aspect of it. And so the whole program is divided into, there's the knitting part and also the weaving. I really did fall in love with the weaving part, and here you can see just a few of the samples we were able to make within the course. So you can see the range of materials, techniques. There's also dyeing. We did some dyeing work projects. There's also 2 jacquard looms in the school, so you can. They do production for artists. And also they have a gallery in place, so if you pass through Montreal, I strongly advise you go, or you reach out if they have an exhibition going, so you can visit. I enrolled in this program because I just got out of a visual arts program, and I wanted to explore a less conventional medium, and I always was curious about textile, so that's why I enrolled, but I didn't really know what to expect. But I was really happy to discover a new language and just how things that surround us are made. So after that, I worked in a few years in the film industry as a process assistant. And one of the movies I worked on was actually a film about a shepherd, a Montreal shepherd that went to France to change his life. And so it's called Berger by Sophie Delas. And so it was my first contact with shepherds, and it was the first time that I got to learn about the difficulties about the full transformation. And that really got my curiosity. And after a few years, I realized that I did not want to do this with my life, and that the textile world really, I missed it a lot. So I decided to enroll in university, which I didn't think I was going to do, but here I am. And so I enrolled in the program, in the BFA, in Fibers and Material Practices at Concordia. I wanted to explore a more conceptual side of my practice because I had a really technique-based formation. So this program being in the fine arts department, it's more geared towards the contemporary art practice. So I was happy to dive a bit more into that. And so the program is divided in 3 main subgroups. There is paper making, there is the structure work, so all that's weaving, knitting, embroidery, basketry, and also surface work, so you can do printing, dyeing. There's really a big range of exploration you can do, and before specializing yourself in your final year. And yeah, so I will be specializing myself more into weaving, which is my preferred way of creating. So now I'd like to present 3 projects I made in the past years. The first one is the Wandering Loom. So in the middle, you can see me and a colleague in the hallway doing it. So this project was aimed at combating the loneliness of working in a studio, because I think you can all know that we do crave these moments of sharing, like we're living right now. But even though I can spend a lot of time alone working on a project, I always try to create these opportunities where I can exchange about weaving with people that love it too. And I also wanted to make a project that encourages the sharing of technique-based practice as well, and the idea of knowledge sharing. And so even though I just arrived at university when I did this project, I was in first year, And I wanted to make people feel more comfortable in this establishment. And so I wanted to take out the practice of the studio and just get out in the hallways, because you walk the hallways and you meet people from other programs, but there's always this kind of mystery about what they're really doing. And when I was telling people I was in the fibers program, they were like, what? They had, the majority didn't know if we even had a fibers program in Concordia. And so I was like, well, I'm going to show them a small part of it. So I have, this is my loom. It's a table loom. I put it on a cart. And then I wrote this sign, "Want to weave," inviting people to come and see me. And I had a bag of cut fabric strips. And I just roamed around and letting people come to me if they were curious. And in the end, 49 people came to see me in about 3 days. And I did this between classes, like in my breaks. And so I was able to teach people how to do plain weave and twill in just a few minutes, and just explaining about their vision of it, my experience with it. And I really enjoyed that weaving became this gathering place as well, just in a hallway that wasn't one spot that one doesn't necessarily stop usually, but now it was like this whole learning experience in the hallway. And I also realized just how unfamiliar the concept of weaving was for some. And so yeah, just the idea of doing a participatory art project as well, which was my first experience with it. It was really rewarding, and having conversations with people I wouldn't have had without this experience. So at the end, I saw the salvages of the long strips we wove, and you can see the unevenness of the rag, and this shows like how many people wove on it with different tensions and just learning through the whole process. And I think it does give a certain charm to it. And I always try to reference like craft-based practices in my work because my initial training. So I think I often do a bridge between more contemporary art and a craft-based practice. So another project I want to talk to you about is called Vessel, so vessel in English. This project grew out of my exploration of the double weave pickup, which is a technique I had just learned, or I even learned through this project. It's more of a study of a technique than a conceptual proposition in this case. So I wanted to take advantage of the double layers of the cloth to create some tensions and transparencies. So you can see there's some open work sections to see through it and let the other side of the other layer appear. Also in the materials I chose two very lustrous materials. I chose linen and then lurex. So from very different origins, but still with one similar quality. And so when it's lit, it really shines, but when it's backlit, you can see all the structure of the weave, which I found quite interesting. And I was able to present this piece at the Biennale Internationale du Lin de Portneuf. And that was my first exhibition. I was really proud of that. So I'm going to pass it around so you can see and touch it, because I think what's nice about textiles is that there's this whole tactile experience also. The third project I want to talk about is called Qu'est-ce que? This project originated in a course I took at the University Javeriana in Bogota, Colombia. I just spent the past year over there doing a student exchange. I did 2 semesters. It wasn't a textile school, it was more just a visual arts program. So I took classes in other mediums, let's say, to just get out of my head a bit. And so this was born in a sound installation class. So the prompt of the class was to make a proposition, an installation about the original sound. And so thinking about this prompt, I wanted to make an installation about the two different types of textile productions. So a craft-based one and then an industrial one. So this is a visual element, but there's also a sound element that's hidden within the braided rug. So there's a speaker hidden, and there's a mix of industrial production and then the like slowness of and tranquility of like a studio-based practice. So you can really see the duality of it. And you can also see the duality of the two rugs presented. So these are two braided rugs. The first one at the top was made by me from fabric scraps. And then the bottom one, the red one, was, as you can see with the tag, a rug bought at a dollar store called Dollar City in Bogota. But it's a part of a Quebecois chain store called Dollarama. Yeah. So they have a few stores in South America. And so I went there to buy some stuff, and I saw this braided rug made in China with a Montreal tag on it in Bogota. I was like, what is happening? This is so weird. And so this struck a chord, and it made me think that when a company like Dollarama replicates objects that have like cultural value rooted in craftsmanship, and it creates a product that's really hard for artisans to compete with. And I think this happens with a lot of communities and a lot of people. But I grew up with braided rugs, so I think it struck a particular chord for me. So that's why I wanted to talk a bit about these tensions between a craft-based practice and then an industrial practice that takes the codes of craft people. And it raised the question of where does the value of an object lie as well. Then this leads me to my most recent interest. So wool processing and the local wool industry. Because in my practice, the origin of materials have always been very important, or I've always thought about it at least. And I tried to find local wool for a project. By local, I mean locally grown, transformed, and distributed. And it was much more difficult than I thought it was going to be. And so this led me to read a book Anna Hunter wrote. I don't know if you know her, but I haven't met her, but I've heard about her. I read her books, and she's shepherdess. She's a mill owner, an author, and an advocate for local wool industry transformation. And I read this book she wrote, and she crosses Canada, meeting shepherds who have conscience of the wool's beauty and want to work with wool transformation. And so she goes to meet them, takes picture, does like a whole portrait of their farm and their work. And she also speaks about the characteristics of the different wools. And I had no idea that in Canada there was all this diversity of wool and sheep. So I was amazed to learn about that. So thank you, Anna. And this also led me to order her second book, which I just started to read, The True Cost of Wool. And she goes more in details about this industry, or the lack thereof. So reading these books do make me want to be an agent of change in this matter, even though I'm not sure what form it's going to take. I'm really excited to get my journey started. And this brings me to the final part of my presentation. So reading the last book led me to know about Les Brebis du Beau Rivage in Quebec, which is a family-run farm that raises sheep for their milk, meat, but also their wool. So they do sell fleece, yarn, and also blankets made from the wool that their sheep grows. And I will pick up my first fleece after Guelph. I'm very excited to start my journey of wool transformation. with my big bag of fleece. So if you have any tips and tricks about that, I've never done anything like that. So excited also for the outings tomorrow to know more about that. So yes, thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, our next speaker is someone we've been waiting a very long time for. Not only because she's the last speaker today, but because she was, she won our, scholarship, thank you, last year.
Yeah.
And went to the airport and was ill and was unable to come.
Yeah.
So she is here in 2026 instead of 2025. Andia Kiburi was a student at the University of California, Davis, where she earned her BA in the design department. And I just learned that she has been admitted to an MFA program at the School of the Arts Institute in Chicago.
Yes.
Andia.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Can you hear me all right? Yeah. Okay, beautiful. So once again, my name is Andia Kibori. Thank you for having me. I'm very happy to finally be here. And also, it was really nice to travel internationally. So that was a nice little plus. First time in Canada. So nice thing all around. All right. So once again, my name is Andia Kibori. I'm a recent graduate or undergrad from design at UC Davis in California, and I'm a current MFA candidate at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago, and I will be moving there in a month. And so I've been a textile artist for a long time. I taught myself how to knit and crochet off of YouTube when I was about 8 years old. And before that, I was doing hand knitting. I was making little lanyards in elementary school. I was making riot rings, selling them at my craft fairs. And way before that, my mom is a visual artist as well. And so at like 3 years old, I would always be drawing something or doing something creative. I love color. That's one of my main things. As you can see, color is very important to me. And then I also do a lot of research in the beginnings of my projects. And I like to nod to the fact that textiles has been a form of liberation for Black women here not here, but in the United States for the last century. And so I use a lot of my work as an extension of my identity as a Black woman, artist, and designer. Okay, so some of my making philosophies, as clothing and textiles is an aspect of life that touches almost everyone. Everyone is wearing a piece of clothing today. I feel like it is a very important avenue for positive societal change. Therefore, I create and design with the intention to create some type of impact, whatever that might be. So with that, I also believe that textile art is fine art. Okay, so this is a long list of some of the things that I've explored. Personally, in my undergrad experience, I had the really great opportunity to take a machine knitting class at the Textile Art Center in Brooklyn, New York, through a scholarship through UC Davis. So I got to do some machine knitting, some Tunisian crochet. I'll talk about that more. I was trained in more service design, which I'll also talk about. And then throughout my undergraduate years, I also worked many graphic jobs to keep the bills paid. So I have a lot of graphic design experience as well that I use very often in my textile art. So this is one of my first fabric collections that I created. It was inspired by traditional mud cloth. The class that I took, we had to look at some type of antique or traditional textile and then transform it and take inspiration from it into a more modern look. So my concept was inspired by mud cloth, like I mentioned, and I wanted to kind of mix it with more psychedelic imagery and colors from the 1970s and 60s to celebrate the growing Pan-Africanism and celebration of Blackness during this decade. And also, since I just love color, it was a beautiful coincidence. I am very inspired by Faith Ringgold, if anyone knows of that quilter. So in the middle is one of her quilts I grew up reading Tar Beach. That's one of her books that she made. I also grew up reading The Invisible Princess, which is about a young girl who's born into slavery, and Mother Nature comes together to make her an invisible princess, and so she's able to come out of that. So I've been inspired by textiles all my life, even though I didn't really know it at the time. So these are some of the digital drawings that I did, taking the motifs from that mud cloth piece that I used. And this mud cloth was at UC Davis. I had the opportunity to actually touch it and see it. It was in they have a really nice textile archive that the students can use. And then at the bottom are just some concept sketches of pattern repeats that I was thinking about. And then here are my final pieces. So all this is handmade by me. I did some indigo techniques in terms of the dyeing, Japanese indigo techniques. This is all reactive synthetic dyes though. I did some screen printing. This one at the bottom corner that I'm pointing at, that's velvet. So that was a really interesting fabric to use and see how the print changed. But I did a lot of repeats. Our professor told us that we had to use more than, I believe, 2 techniques on one piece. So she also wanted us to do some embroidery as well. And then, okay, so this is my honors project, the Lucky Bustle. I'm reclaiming Black womanhood through fashion. Well, I'll get to that in a moment, actually. I will do a bit of a warning. There is some nudity and also some very racist images, so just to forewarn y'all. So this project was through the UC Davis honors projects program. I had to apply. This was not something that all students have the opportunity to do. So I went through a few rounds of writing up my proposal with my professor, and I was able to get it approved through the department, and I was also able to get the Christina Bullock Sustainability Scholarship through the school as well. So it was nicely funded, which I really appreciate, and I went through that. So through my research, I wanted to talk about the Jezebel caricature, which is a overly sexualized image of Black womanhood that was, began during probably about the 1930s and before that, honestly. But that being said, I pulled some of this memorabilia from a few areas of the United States. So first we have the Zulu Lulu, which they're stirring sticks for your drinks, and they basically show the progression or the aging of a woman through their breasts, so if you notice it. And then we also have these lucky lures, and this is what I focused on. The lucky lures, these were, I don't know, I guess souvenirs that were given out all throughout the United States. I couldn't find any clear research or any fully academic writing about these. I found a lot of images online, a lot of Reddit posts about people who had them just in their parents' or their grandparents' garage. And essentially the joke was that you could catch a bass with anything. So it was images of Black women naked and or babies and or men. And so through this project, I started out with a lot of historical research. And I kind of wanted to comment on how the commodification of the body also allows us to commodify nature and those connections, and how these images were grossly objectifying. And so through that, I wanted to create a bustle dress. So some of you might know the bustle dress. It was popular during the 19th century, and there's some historical discourse about the origin of it. There's a group that believes that it was largely inspired by Sarah Bartman, who was an African woman who was basically paraded or put around through almost like freak shows because of how large her body was. And then she was later put into slavery. But that being said, I really wanted to honor her and her journey. And so I decided to use the bustle dress as the main form of my project. So the project is a top, a skirt, and then the overskirt, which includes the bustle. The top well, actually, I'll get into the skirt first. The skirt is more important in my opinion. The skirt, actually, go back. The skirt, I really wanted to represent. If you've ever been to a fish and bait shop, the walls are pretty visually overwhelming. They have tons of stuff on the different racks, and I was always really drawn to that as a kid, especially like the Walmart aisle. I think it was color, and so I wanted to kind of have that feeling in the skirt. So it's a lot of repeating panels. And then the bustle is a fish itself, and I will get more into my technique. So I used a mixture of indigo dye and cyanotype. And so I did a lot of experimentation. All of the indigo yarn that I ended up using was these many different colors. It was yarns that I got from a free reuse store that is in Sacramento, and just things that I had personally. And so that's me dyeing it in a little Home Depot bucket. And then those are my cyanotype samples. I'm very proud of the far left one of the woman image. I drew that digitally, and then I burned the image. If any of y'all are familiar with cyanotypes, it's a UV activated process. So you have to do it in a dark room or low light. And essentially you treat the whatever surface. So for me, I did Tunisian crochet, which is a mixture of kind of like crochet and knitting, if any of y'all have heard of that. I did that because it's a flatter surface, so I was able to take the image better. And you basically just put a transparency image over whatever surface you treated, you put it outside, and you wait. And so these were the images that I was able to get out of that. I did some lace transparencies. I used actual lace as well, and then I did my own drawings. And so here are more examples. So for the skirt, I did individual crochet Tunisian panels that I then did the cyanotype process on top of, as well as the top. And so this is the final project. I was able to show this at the fashion show that they have every year at the end of UC Davis, the school year, which was really nice. And so this is me, photograph next to it. It says Lucky Lore on the top, and then you can see the skirt with all the panels invoking the aisle. And then I was very lucky for the top. I found a fully crocheted panel from just a random thrift store. A lot of people throw away beautiful doilies and different crochet pieces that people obviously spend a lot of time on, and so I really wanted to utilize that. And the same with the skirt. The bustle itself, the back, I did a Rashi indigo dye technique, and that was a huge piece of indigo, or a huge piece of crochet fabric that someone made, and I was really lucky to find that. I also utilized some of my mom's indigo. She's also a textile artist. She quilts. And then, so yeah, that kind of lands into my Bag Lady collection. So during this whole time, starting about 2020 during the pandemic, I have my own business. I sell bags amongst many other things. And so these are some examples of my bags that I have made. It's a mix of crochet, and then quilted, and also indigo, which I will show later. This is very heavily influenced by just the Black tradition of quilting. So that's why I was really sad to miss out on last year's meeting, because I felt like this was really aligned with what y'all were doing. And then I wanted to showcase this piece because the woman in the image, she is a quilter that people behind her she made. Her name's Margaret Fabricio, and she's in San Francisco, and she's 96 years old. And she works so prolifically. I don't understand how she does everything that she does. And she commissioned me to make a bag. And so I made this crazy quilt inspired bag for her, and I indigo dyed the ruffles that I crocheted and the straps. And then I also commissioned my mom because she has a long arm, and I did not want to do those concentric circles on my home machine. So she did that back piece for me. And so this is some examples of my indigo pieces that I did. Some of the fabric I dyed myself, some of the fabric my mom dyed, and then there's some West African fabric in there as well. as well as some at the very corner, you can see the embroidery that I did over that, inspired by Victorian crazy quilts. And so more recently, last year I went to the Penland School of Crafts, and I took a felting class with the artist Nastasia E. Swift. She's from Virginia, and it was a really amazing time. Her work is wildly inspiring. This is an example of one of her felted pieces that she does. They're very large. This piece is probably about like here to here, and it's all hand felted, so she's just stabbing away. Her work ethic and the images that she was able to get has really inspired me more recently. And so with that, I've always been drawing and painting. And so I really wanted to transform these portraits and images into my textile work. So this was kind of the beginning of that. I cut up a canvas that I painted on, and then I sewed it onto a granny square that I had. And then this has moved on to my felted pieces. So this is about 36 by 36 inches. I'm working on it currently. It's all needle felted, and that's just some 100% wool fabric that I found at another reuse store. And so I've been working on this, and I'm debating on whether or not I'm going to wet felt it later on. And these are some other examples of my current work. This is a felted eye that I created right after the Penland School of Crafts opportunity. And then I did a homage to one of my favorite books and movies, The Color Purple by Alice Walker. And so I messed around with filet crochet, and then I created the chart personally, and then I followed it. And then I also did some wet felting. So there's a bit of a pink background on there. And that is the end. Next day. Okay. Oh, really quick. I'm sorry. I also forgot to mention, I have a zine that explains my projects, and it also opens up into a poster. So I will pass that around after the checks. There you go. I'll stay.
Thank you. Will all of the scholarship students come back, please, so that we can have a question and answer session? Great. Thanks for the applause. This is wonderful. Okay, questions for our scholarship students? Yes.
First of all, I want to say I'm Textile Arts is in a really good place right now. With all what do you call your loom?
Right now she's just my loom. I haven't had her for long enough to give her a true name yet, but we're still getting to know each other. She sleeps next to me, so yeah.
Excuse me. Other questions? Yes.
Also for Ashley, you said you did some beginning weaving teaching. Wondering how you describe the students you have. Who wants to learn how to weave? Repeat the question.
Okay, she's asking me to describe the students that I teach. So the workshop that I teach at welcomes all students of all ages in. So usually it seems like my classes will range from people as young as 20 to people in their 50s and 60s. So it's really a wide range of people. I always find a lot of joy seeing their personalities come into their weavings, and it's so hard to kind of describe to them how what they're going to be making. So I come with samples from past students, but it's still like hard to conceptualize. So seeing that kind of come about as the class progresses, it's a 5-week class, 1 day a week. And I find that as time goes on, they start subconsciously dressing like their work. But also there are weavers who are super technical, even if they've never woven before, and weavers who are very experimental and open to kind of like breaking the rules of the loom. Yeah, so it's really a wide range of people.
Whoa. Oh. Uh-oh.
All good.
Go ahead.
I think we all would probably like more people like you involved. What would it be for you to be able to back as young people begun to inspire us with your intelligence and creativity? How would you see your future? Would you see your future involved in an organization like this? And what advice would you give us to bring on more people like you?
I can answer the first part. I can answer the first part. Yeah, okay. I guess what do I see for myself in the future with this work?
Coming back to work.
And coming back to work. Well, I actually originally came in at UC Davis with a degree in international relations. So I wanted to become a lawyer and I wanted to work for some kind of a nonprofit. And so I feel like this is a good mixture of that and my intentions. So I definitely plan on participating in WARP and very similar programs for sure. Anyone else want to say?
Just reiterating the question so I understand the answer. So it's, what would it take for us to come back to work, or what our feelings on work and how you would be able to market it to younger generations like us? As an artist, I'm also an entrepreneur. So I always wanted to start a business or start like a social enterprise or be able to help people in some way. And while we were talking earlier, I got really inspired by inventing shuttles or little something that can help weavers or help a certain community. I want to stay in textile and fiber arts, especially looking into different techniques, even a double weave. I think I need more than just a double weave. I could go thinner with my yarn. I really feel like I could push the boundaries with whatever textiles I really want to get into. It's just taking that step of getting a loom and getting settled into my work. For marketing, of course, bringing new people in, young people in that will inspire people, especially social media, having that team, I think is a great step in the media and knowing about you.
It's also talking about how to bring young people in, and maybe you could target the craft schools and have an ambassador to representation. Because I know that when I did the Center of Contemporary Textile, which is artisan based, it was always inspiring when people from the milieu or the industry came to see us, because I remember feeling a bit lost about what I was expecting of the future and my place as an artisan today, because it seemed just like harder and harder to live from one's craft, and to know that there's some organization like yours that help this kind of life happen. So yeah, I would think reach out to these schools.
Part of what Norma is saying is we hope you'll come back. That's the bottom line. Yes.
Is about what helps you get started? Are you teaching draw? Do you go for random walks? Do you watch films? Like, what's your process like before you even get to making? Or are you making as you're working?
What the question was, how do you get started? What is your process for getting started on your projects?
Yeah. How you get inspired and how you ideas. Very curious.
I'll start. You all, okay.
We'll start on this end and we'll go down.
Please.
So
we wrote a version, but my kind of process is I'm really inspired by my environment. So of course, we go for walks, look at the world around me, look at what I feel is the happiest part of the world, because sometimes I focus too much on the dark, and so I need to make something that's light. And I think that's where I really ground myself in it. I'm a very chaotic person in the studio, especially with not just wanting to do one thing. So, yeah, there's a little bit of mellow time, and then it's make.
I feel like I am a large planner, and I feel like that's why I really connect with textile art. I draw a lot. A lot of my work is inspired by my identity, and also just historical research. So wherever that inspiration comes from, I've been exploring more surrealist work, so that's been more in tune with like my emotions and what I was feeling immediately in that felted piece that I showed. That was a self-portrait. But yeah, and in terms of what my studio looks like and that process is everywhere. It's in my room. I do have a little like offshoot off of my mom's studio that I mainly use as honestly storage. But yeah, since textiles is so portable, especially if I'm working on a piece for my business, I usually just have it on me wherever I'm at, whether that's work. I'm a substitute teacher too, so I taught K through 12 the last year, so there's a lot of knitting on campus. Yeah.
I think it's very different for everyone, like what can inspire them based on the spaces that they might be in. I know that as soon as I arrived in KCI's fiber department, like seeing the space that was there, the gallery is so vertical that in order to hang certain things, we use a cherry picker to be able to get to the ceiling. And even when we're up there, we have to throw weights over certain metal beams to be able to then like attach things. So that sheer amount of space, I was like, oh, I can go really big with work. And then different samples start to arise based on maybe where you're at or what's around you. So it's definitely why I brought up my time in that studio, because it's certainly shaped a lot of the scale.
For me, I would kind of say all of the above, what you said, going on walks, music, reading, movies. Kind of the most inspiration I would say is in people watching and looking in people's eyes, and seeing what we both feel, whether strangers or people that I know. But sometimes I do just dye a color that I didn't keep dyeing until I put it on my loom and let it come to me as I go. Every once in a while I do sketch, but usually that changes. The piece that I'm working on now, I had a totally different line for with merging the two pieces, and then I realized I did my math wrong and it changed into something that I like better. This math is hard, so yes.
I'd say it changed through the years. At first, it was very much planned, and I think that learning weaving helped me go in that direction, because you do have to plan a certain amount, right? But then last year, being in Bogota and not being able to weave, I think it really changed my way of responding to my creativity. And so I went on a lot of walks, and I actually took prints in the sidewalks quite a bit, because I would like all these interesting textures and tiles. And I did a lot of drawing as well. And yeah, so I'm feeling like I'm in a time in my life where it's changing. I'm feeling it sort of a transformation. But when I get an idea, it's just like, pops in my head and I cannot sleep at night. And it's just like, it has to get out. Yeah.
I've been told to hurry up. So we're going to take one more question. Clearly you. Betsy, pardon. No more questions.
Lovely scholarship students will be here for the rest of the time. We do have another session starting in 6 minutes.
Okay.
And we need to be respectful of our next speakers. So please, thank you.
I'm going to try to roll the back and introduce two people, Sarah Sawson and Cheryl Mush, who are members of the scholarship committee and have not yet been acknowledged. The other two, so please. Sarah and Sheila. And the other two members were not able to make it, but Karen Battle? No, Lynn Battle and Karen Searle. Thank you.
Sorry to be the bad guy. Please enjoy a quick comfort break and then we will restart at 4:35. Thank you.
I like, is nobody else in the room watching the clock? Like, why do I have to be coming in and like kicking people out? What is this?
So should we check that the next presentation is fine?
Of course, let's do that. I'm going to, let me clear some of these out so we don't have all this open. Let me see if I've got any others that are okay. That's very good. And I think it should be this one. This is what I was given.
Yes.
So let's do that. Oh, just a moment. Let me, sorry, before we do that, let me just do this and mute this because Okay. She's doing a shameless plug.
Okay,
here, shameless plug.
Okay.
Okay, very briefly, my question for the scholarship with recipients was, how can we follow along with your future endeavors and careers? What public facing platforms do you have? So websites, email addresses, and most popularly, Instagram. So I have received a sheet of paper here with all of the Instagram accounts and websites of these recipients, and I encourage you to find them and follow along, and I will also be posting it on the website. Thank you.
Thanks.
Are we ready? Yeah, okay. I'd like to introduce both Wade Weir and Deborah Lewis here. Wade is a clothing designer turned mill owner and operator, embarked on a journey to create ethical, sustainable fashion. Her search for high-quality, local, natural, non-toxic materials led her to worldwide challenges faced in wool processing. Driven by a desire to produce slow fashion garments that are environmentally and socially responsible, Wave established the Wave Fiber Mill in 2022. By doing so, she has proven that sustainable fashion can be made accessible to consumers, offering garments that, as well as protecting the wearer in comfort, are waste-free, non-toxic, and return to the soil as a nutrient. Deborah founded Upper Canada Weaving in 2010 to reproduce 19th century Ontario textiles such as coverlets, rag carpets, and linens. Initially using a small-scale textile production model as inspired by 19th century Ontario cottage weavers, they wove cushion fabrics designated for, they wove custom fabrics designated for museums and individuals wanting distinctive fabrics. They became practiced at producing textiles by hand in a sustainable manner using locally sourced and locally processed fiber. Today, their fabrics are also finding a niche in the fashion world through Deborah's work with fashion designers to create unique fabrics tailor-made for their garment collections. Wave and Deborah.
Are you saying anything first?
Well, thank you so much. It's an honor to be at this festival and conference, and also an honor to be here with my friend and colleague, Wave. We have worked together on many projects, and it's always a learning process that I benefit from. My interest in textiles began probably as a small child, interested in equipment and Ontario textiles, coverlets, and I went to art school to do weaving, and then eventually kind of branched out and started, instead of just learning from books and secondhand materials, I started to seek out weavers who were kind of keeping the traditions that I was interested in alive through their practices. So when I went, especially down to Vermont, to learn from weavers that were working on old equipment, 19th century equipment, I found that my work really started to click in, because I was learning from people who were teaching me, but I was also learning from people like these two, Kate Smith and Norman Kennedy, who were taking those old techniques and teaching on old equipment, and that really became my teacher, working on old equipment and working in methods that had been kind of passed down from generation to generation by the professional weavers that I had an interest in doing research on. So that kind of has always informed where I want to be with
my work is working with old equipment and being inspired by old patterns and techniques. And a lot of those techniques inform, even when I'm asked to design something that is modern and new, I feel like my vocabulary always goes back to those practices. So after working with Kate and Norman, I also had the opportunity to work at a historic site, Black Creek Pioneer Village, where I was able to interpret the past to members of the public. In this context where I was spinning and doing natural dyeing on a small scale, and then also reproducing textiles in the textile shop, which was at Black Creek Pioneer Village, all in costume, which I really enjoyed that full immersive approach to doing that. While I was at Black Creek too, I kind of developed an interest in the song tradition associated with textiles, and sometimes I would do some programs where we would incorporate the song tradition in mostly spinning. There's also a song tradition for textiles where you fold the cloth, and most of that is done through the language of Scottish Gaelic. So that's another offshoot of what I do. This is me in my studio, which is in my attic. So I really like working in this space because it just seems like traditionally weavers always seem to be put in these small spaces that they have to cope with. So as you can see by the roof line, I'm quite pent in there. So out of that little space, I am able to do a fairly impressive number of yards of cloth for designers that we spoke of. So everything that I do is very small scale, but like we did a project a few years ago where we ended up doing about 100 yards in the end, right from that loom. So it was kind of a big production for us to scale up to do, but it was great. So over to Wade now.
Thank you, Deborah. So I did make some notes because I can talk for hours in any direction. So I'm trying to keep myself on key. The question was basically, who are you? Why do you do what you do? What made you you? And for me, that's almost an impossible question to answer. I don't know why, but anyway, we started out, my parents lived in a bush, a log cabin, on an island. I'm the middle one. And so my parents were artists. So we were poor. We had absolute access to all sorts of tools and all sorts of materials. So if we wanted something, we made it. So you just started doing things. At the age of 6, I learned how to sew. By grade 8 or age of 8, about knitting and embroidery. I learned early that when you're sewing something, humans and dolls are round, so that 1-inch arm won't fit when you sew it together. So it was that kind of learning that, you just do things kind of thing. So by high school, I was making all of my own garments, and I was thrilled when the nylon jerseys came out, because sergers weren't around really then. There's people nodding, yeah. And so these lovely synthetic jerseys, you didn't have to finish the edges. But what I started noticing is that when I reached into my closet for something, that sweater or pants that I was going to wear that day, I always reached for the natural fiber. So I started paying attention to what it was I was doing and feeling good in. And so then I started, okay, natural fiber, but all natural fiber is equal. So then you start thinking, okay, where was it made? How, I wanted responsible natural fiber. And then I've taken it a little further where now I want responsible, ethical, natural fiber that is non-toxic. It does no harm at this end. It does no harm to my body, and it does no harm when I finally, use it up and put it into the ground or, that kind of thing. So that's kind of where I started and ended up going. So I had a natural fiber clothing company, and I was importing organic cotton, linen, silks, wools. I actually, in the States, I had some woolens made for me. And I had taken it to Halifax, Nova Scotia, was there for a few years and sold the business and came home. Never going to do that again. I don't know about your life, but all these things that you think you're going to do or not do. But anyway, so after about 20 years, I thought, well, maybe I'll start my clothing company again. But this time I wanted my natural fiber to be within my fiber shed. And that was a new term for me as well, learning the fiber shed. And that wasn't as easy to find. I thought in 20 years, everybody's gone way past me, but I couldn't find what I wanted, both the quality and the quantity for a line of clothing. So I found the Ontario Fiber Shed Association, and I helped to facilitate a provincial roundtable conference. This is through the association that I met Deborah. And I also came face to face with the farmers. And I had never considered that end before. The idea that farmers were burning and burying their wool. Are you kidding me? But I had never, been exposed to that. So I thought, okay, well, farmers need processing. I just want some fabric. And I live in one of the lowest per capita income areas in Ontario. And I thought, well, we need jobs. So let's just start a mill. Doesn't everybody do that? So it's the most expensive fabric I have ever made. But so that's kind of how we started.
Yeah, and fortunately, that's what led me to WAVE. So we kind of, WAVE and I have kind of like parallel stories, but we sort of, deviate off of each other, but very similar values. And for me, when I started weaving, I think one of the presentations talked about that, like, where do you find locally sourced stuff? And I was very interested in Ontario reproductions, and I was making them with yarn that came from New Hampshire, and it was commercially dyed, and that just didn't sit well for me. So when the fiber shed sort of thing started to happen, it really opened my eyes to what I could do. And also, I've always had a lot of people kind of inspiring me and being my cheerleader. And one of my cheerleaders is right there, the man to the right there, Rajiv Surendra. He's a friend from Black Creek, and he just said, can you make Ontario tweed? So it kind of sent me on a journey of finding the right breed, and we wanted it undyed. And so I first started with tweed yarn from Scotland and kind of tested it out, and then kind of eventually came to a fiber and a twist and a yarn that would work for that. For other projects, I needed other breed types. And this has been another person that's been very inspiring to me. He's has a wonderful farm in Huron County in Ontario, and that green shirt that he's wearing was made by WAVE. And so it's the wool from the backs of his sheep that you see behind him. And it was dyed in indigo and goldenrod by a colleague of mine who lives close by. And in that, his breed of sheep, Arcot, are the most beautiful sheep for flannel. So, and it was a really nice way that I met him and started to use his wonderful fiber. Now, this is getting back to the tweet story, and I had the good fortune to go to Copley's in Hamilton to have my tweed made into a suit for Rajiv. And it is, you know, when we're making things, we just don't know the standard in which we're making it in a way, because we're thinking, you know, it's just made by me. And we're kind of told, maybe as Canadians, that our stuff is never good enough. You know what I mean, Wade? Like other people in Italy and other parts of the world, they make beautiful textiles, but we don't. So it was great to bring this that came from a farm. You know, it was dirty, and then it got processed at Wellington Fibers, and then it got made into a beautiful suit that Rajiv wears in Manhattan. So it was a great journey. Whenever I can, I like to use locally sourced, locally milled, locally dyed yarn for my projects. And so I got approached by a man who wanted fabric for his 1930 Model A car. And so he had a swatch of it, and I looked at it and I analyzed it, and yes, let's do it. And so I made fabric for that, and actually Wave at her wonderful mill spun some of the yarn for that project. So it was great. Like, I love the challenge of taking something. I love doing reproductions from the 19th century, but I also love the challenge of making something that was made in the industrial period, like say the 20s, 30s, 40s, and weaving it on a hand loom. Back to Wade.
Okay, so this is the farm. So what we do, we at the mill, we process for any farmer in Canada, small size farmer. We start at a 50-pound minimum. So we're big enough to kind of make a difference, small enough to actually be breed specific. So we farmers come in, we wash, cards, spin, all the way through. Mostly people are looking for yarns, and then could often go on to blankets and things like that. We try and be as local as possible. This, the One Family Farm, this is one of the first farms that we got fish from. So we process for farmers, but then also we have our own line of garments. And so we purchase from farmers like this. And we've self-mandated to say that everything we do, all the wool that we use is Ontario grown. And then we actually take it a little further and say we want Ontario grown from responsible farms, where they have regenerative practices and they treat the sheep well. And the northern, a lot of you guys might not see this kind of escape. The northern winters are harsh and snowy, but we find that sheep that are kept outside year round are healthier, cleaner, and have almost no problems lambing. So we look at those practices on the farm. There's different breeds, different crosses. A lot of traditionally here it has become the fiber is a byproduct of the meat farming industry. And there's more and more farms now we're finding coming to the mill maybe because they have more opportunity now to process, but they're starting to look at their fiber and how they can maximize that and add value to what they do on their farm. So, and this is our 15-mile block that actually made this sweater. And so we, it used to be they'd call the black sheep because, you know, you couldn't dye the wool. And so we are collecting black sheep because now we can do all of our darks without any dyes at all. So this literally is a 15-mile carbon footprint. It goes from our farm 15 miles to the mill and leaves the mill as a product with no dyes, no chemicals in it, that kind of thing. So that's one of the things we're doing. This is, yeah, again, the sheep outside year round. And so, yeah, we get quite a cross section. We hunt out the dark colors. We hunt out fine fiber. Never talking about different breeds. I've heard more than I want to hear that Canadian breeds are only good for carpets and upholstery. And we have some gorgeous, gorgeous yarns and fleeces here in Canada.
Okay, next section. Okay, so these are some of the projects that I've worked on. So that slide that you saw previously of the man with the green shirt, that's where I was getting most of my wool for my flannels when I started researching what would be the best wool that would give us a nice flannel. So this flannel shirt project kind of came about because there was a conference in Montreal and somebody from our fiber shed was there, and she was talking about, you know, us trying to promote locally sourced stuff. And so a man approached her and said, well, I don't want a suit. Like, I'm not a suit guy, but I would wear a flannel shirt. So that kind of started the process of, you know, what's the best breed to create flannel. So I kind of did a bit of research and then looked around and eventually found this farm, which, as Wave was saying, this is like a breed that was created, Orcott, that was created as a meat breed for Canada. And nobody really bothers much with the wool, but the farmer that you saw in the green shirt, he actually did a lot of his training in New Zealand, and he just always had an eye for what is good fiber. So he kind of selects the sheep that have the better fiber. So this is the person behind the flannel shirt project. And so I must say, a lot of what I do is kind of a partnership between a customer. So a customer comes to me with a problem, and I kind of go about trying to find the solution. And I really love doing that. I really love that process of working with other people, and also whenever I can, try to extend my supply chain. So the farmer, and then the person that dyes, and then the mill that spins. So it's nice to extend that. There are so many great breeds in Ontario that are also heritage breeds, including one of my favorites, Border Leicester, which was really prevalent in Ontario in the 19th century. And it's a really nice long wool that gives you a really lovely, lustrous wool that's great for coverlets. So I sought this one out and then had this one spun for a coverlet project that I did for a museum down in Niagara, the Jordan Museum. This is actually, I used that border Leicester for a reproduction for a customer who approached me and wanted an indigo dyed coverlet. So it really worked out nicely, and it really actually, this one, when I look at it, it reminds me, I did this one when I first kind of started doing reproductions, but I used the wool from New Hampshire. And that was one of the things that always like bothered me, that I wasn't using Ontario wool, and it was just chemical dye. So it was great to bring that authenticity. This is another sheep breed. It's not a heritage sheep breed, but it is a good breed for a lot of the kind of work I do. And Wave was saying that, you know, sometimes Canadians get put down because our wool is only good for carpets and upholstery. And I always say, that's the best wool in the world. I'm just going to make a little segue. When I was going to art school, I had a part-time job working, repairing Persian carpets. And I remember when we would do actual repairs, we'd restructure and repile holes. And we would use like whatever wool that had the right color. And it was never the right quality of wool because it wasn't for upholstery or carpets. It wasn't that beautiful wool that you get in the Middle East that they use for this purpose. So using the Coopworth, I made a carpet for Upper Canada Village, and there I just have 2 strands there. They gave me a little piece of the carpet for me to work out the design and also the density and all that. So that little strand off to the right-hand side is from the original carpet. And you can see how long and lustrous and strong that is. And so that's what I got from the Coopworth. I got that really super shiny wool that I just can't get enough of. So that's a close up, and you just see that wool just sparkles. And it's the exact polar opposite of like a flannel. So you really need all these breeds, and you need people who know how to work with them and spin them and bring them into their maximum beauty. So that's why like places like Wave, when I ask, you know, could you do such and such for me? Then, you know, they're treating it differently depending on the breed, what kind of twist you put on it, whether it's more ideal to ply it because it's more of a shredding type wool. So this is, again, my upholstery for the Model A car. And you know, depending on what it's used for, sometimes I'll blend in some mohair, especially if it is upholstery. This was an interesting project because when I saw the original piece of fabric there and analyzed it thread by thread, we saw that the yarn itself was multicolored. It had about 5 colors in it. So we had to dye it in the fleece and then get it spun to get that beautiful heathered look. So that was done by the dyer I work with, very talented dyer Liam Blackburn from Iron Cauldron Colorworks. There are many beautiful breeds like in Ontario where you can get like colored wool. This is one of them. This is one of the ones that I use. It's called Norboulet, and it's a breed type. It's not a registered breed, but it's a breed type based mostly on Rambouillet. And you take the Rambouillet, which is kind of a French version of merino, and it gets mixed in with other breeds to give it that special Norboulet, which only Alison Brown knows, the shepherd. This is another example. This was a car upholstery project that I worked on. An extremely complex weave structure to get that waviness. So that was a challenge to do. And it was so fine. The yarn that I used to weave that was 6,000 yards per pound in a single. So, we couldn't dye that after, so it had to be dyed in the fleece and then spun. So here's the tweed suit that I was mentioning before, and it's always like a wonderful experience when I can do something that is just, people say you can't do it, and so we did it. We made a beautiful herringbone wool using locally sourced and that could be in a magazine in GQ. Yeah, so it's always important for us to trace our wool and also involve as many people in the process.